So for the first 5 weeks of the course, we've been going over chapters 1 through 5, but now we have a little bit of a change here. We're going to start with chapter 9, and chapter 9 starts the discussion on different exercise training types. It's not going to be the case that throughout your athletic season that everybody will be doing the same type of exercise training. There's a term called periodization that implies that you're going to be doing certain types of training during certain parts of the season. So what we'll do is we'll start a general discussion in regards to the terminology of training, but then at the end of the lecture, what we'll do is I'll show you my periodization chart, and I'll go through some ACSM guidelines in regards to putting together some exercise training programs, specifically resistance training programs. I'll show you how I do that. In gymnastics, although I think that our guys are strong, in gymnastics, I don't think that our guys really use strength too much. I think that our guys use power, and there's a difference between strength and power. So strength is the maximal force that a muscle or muscle group can generate. Usually it's going to be lifted one time. So it's a maximal effort. All right, you could be measuring static strength or dynamic strength, right? Static strength is the ability to, say, for instance, hold an iron cross on rings, all right? Hold out as long as you can because your body is not moving. But dynamic strength would mean like your joint angle is varying as you're doing the exercise. So you could do a bench press, you could do a curl, a squat, an RDL. In any event, when you measure your strength, what you're going to be doing is a 1 repetition max. A 1 repetition max test is an exercise assessment where what you do is you start out with somewhat lower weights, and then you add weight and add weight and add weight and add weight until you figure out what the weight is that an individual can only do one time. It's a maximum effort, a one-time maximum effort, and that's an assessment that you can use to measure total strength. Now, when a kid does gymnastics and they're doing an iron cross or they're doing a handstand push-up or something, they're never really lifting their maximal effort. They're lifting their body weight. And sometimes if you're on the rings and you're doing, a cross or something, you're lifting your body weight, but this arm here is lifting half of your body weight, and this arm is lifting half of your body weight. So each arm is lifting half of your body weight. But there are some kids in the gym who are really strong. And let's say, for instance, I have my level 10. My level 10 is the older guy. He's 17 years old. He weighs about, let's say, 160 pounds. And that means each of his arms is holding 80 pounds. Right? He's able to lift 80 pounds with each of his arms. And there's a little bit of physics involved that makes it so it's not quite 80 pounds. Maybe it's a little bit less than that. But Yusuf can lift far more than 80 pounds with one arm. If he did a bench press, he could probably bench 225 right now. So, I mean, he could probably bench more than 80 pounds. So in gymnastics, he's not using a maximal effort. He's using a sub-max effort, sub-maximum effort. Right? So I don't really think that Yusuf is using strength or muscular strength. He's probably using some type of muscle endurance, or he's using power. And we'll talk about the difference between strength and power. But I think that strength is something that maybe a little child is working on when he's 5 years old and doing a pull-up and he can't even do one. That might be an example of strength. But I would argue in gymnastics, they use power rather than strength. All right, so let's just take a look at what the definition of power is. All right, so power is dependent upon the rate at which the strength is distributed in regards to time. So power is equal to work times distance. All right. So power is equal to work. Sorry, I think it's work divided by distance. Work divided by distance. And work is equal to force times, yeah, this is what it is here. 1 second. Sorry. Should be like this. Work divided by time. The amount of time it takes for you to do the work is power. So if the time is low, then the denominator is low and the amount of power is way high. Or if the amount of work that you do is really high, then the numerator is going to go up. And again, the power value will increase. And work is equal to force times distance. So power is equal to force, power is equal to force times distance divided by time. And distance is equal to rate times time. And therefore distance, this D here is and then rate is equal to distance divided by time. That's velocity, right? Miles per hour. So that means that power is equal to force here times velocity. So power is equal to force times distance divided by time, which is equal to rate. So power is a combination of the amount of force, but also the speed at which you distribute that force. So somebody like Ronda Rousey might not necessarily be as strong as Cassie. All right. She might not be able to distribute as much force as Cassie can, but she's able to distribute that force with an incredibly fast rate. She can punch very quickly. And because she's able to distribute that force at an incredible speed, that makes her powerful, more powerful. All right, so that's the definition of power. Now, I would argue that in gymnastics, the athletes are using more power. They're using whatever force they can come up with, and they're trying to run down the vault fast. They're trying to tap or change their body shape as they hold on to the high bar very quickly. Or in the gym, I'm trying to make them more forceful. I'm trying to make their muscles more powerful so that they can increase this force component of power. But when they're working out from day to day, it's going to be really difficult for me to increase this muscle force. Over time, through hypertrophy training, I can make their muscles more forceful. But from a day-to-day perspective, it's easier for me to manipulate this rate part of the equation later on, when I show you my periodization chart, I'll show you how I change strength and conditioning to work with power. And the easiest thing that I do is I use a stopwatch. During strength training, it's more about the number of reps that you do within each set. And I'll show you what that means. But during power training, it's more about how fast are you finishing your reps within that set. And also, you got to make sure that you're not just doing it with speed in spite of technique, because I don't want to incur biomechanical disadvantages and start to injure my athletes or anything like that. So typically power, especially in gymnastics, is something I focus on a little bit more than absolute strength. And as the athlete gets older and older, their body weight isn't going to increase more, but their need to increase power is going to. So in gymnastics, I really focus on power training, although that's a little bit of, not true, because I will show you my periodization chart. It depends on when during the season or the off season are we training. And then I can work on strength and power separately. So usually during my off season, I'll work on muscle building first, and then I'll work on muscle strength and muscle power. And then I'll work on muscle maintenance, and then I'll work on muscle endurance. Anyway, I'll show you what that means. But there is a difference between strength and power. And it could be the case that somebody who's like doing soccer is not going to be working with the maximum amount that you can lift. You're only going to be running, your body weight up and down the field. The ball isn't a maximum effort, but your ability to cut, your ability to kick the ball quickly across the field is more a representation of power than it is strength. Same thing in hockey, right? Drew, you're never really skating with a weight vest on, right? And skating with the most amount of effort that you could possibly lift. But what you are doing is you are skating quickly, moving your feet explosively, checking somebody with as much speed as you can quickly into the boards, So it's more about the rate of work. The rate is always the velocity. And anytime you see power, it always implies this rate or velocity of doing work, or the rate of which ATP can be created, or the rate at which glucose can be broken down. All right, so power is always implying that there's a time aspect of this particular measurement. So muscular power is the ability to distribute force over a particular amount of time. If your body can't get more forceful, if you can't make your muscles more forceful, then you can always increase the power that you're using or that you're distributing by exerting that force over a faster period of time. Okay, so that's the difference between strength and power. All right, so this is just another iteration. Power is equal to work divided by time. Work is force times distance. Therefore, power is equal to work divided by time. Work is equal to force times distance. Distance divided by time is velocity. Therefore, power is force times velocity. Now, I think that working on the force part of the equation here means that I have to build muscle. And building muscle is costly for the body. It requires amino acids and protein. It requires hormones. It requires a lot of change. And the body doesn't really want to change too much. The body wants to try to get itself to do more work or to be more powerful without changing much. Now, if your neurological patterns have adapted and your technique is as good as it can be, then the only other option your body has is to increase the muscular force. But for my athletes, over the course of a 4-hour workout, I'm not going to make them more forceful. I can't change their muscles, but I can tell them to run faster. I can tell them to stay tighter and store energy better. I can tell them to kick their feet faster and move faster. So over the course of a workout, I feel as though I can manipulate this velocity component of power more so than I can work this force component of power. The force component of power is more long-term change, and the velocity component of power is something that I believe that the guys can work on from turn to turn. So I try to get them to manipulate their velocity of effort. One way to measure strength and power is using these Biodex machines. And what you have is somebody's doing a leg extension, and this bar here is attached to some gears in this machine. And this machine goes to a computer, and that computer measures their angular strength, the force that they're using, and it can give you some estimates of power. But we don't have one of these in our lab. So we're going to have to give you some different assessments of muscular strength. And one way to assess muscular strength is with a 1 repetition max test. A 1 repetition max test would be like you have a bench press and you want to do your 1 RM max in a bench press. You'd put whatever weights you think that you can handle on, then you add a little bit more weight, add a little bit more weight until you can only lift the weight one time. And that weight would be an indicator of your 1 RM max. But in our lab, we don't have a full weight room, so we can't do that. So usually what we'll do is we'll estimate your 1 repetition max. And the way to estimate it is to use a lesser amount of weight. Let's say I use 50 pounds. I only have 225. Let's say I use 50 pounds. Well, if I can do 50 pounds for 5 reps, all right, that's not as many reps as obviously if I do 50 pounds for 10 reps or 50 pounds for 15 reps. And then there are equations that you can use that you can plug in the amount of weight that you're lifting and the number of reps that you're able to do. And then given that equation, you're able to estimate your 1 repetition max. And that's what I would suggest in terms of our assessment of our 1 RM max within this lab portion or the lab portion of this class. We just don't have the resources. It's also some people really aren't lifters, so they don't know necessarily how to lift heavy weight, and I don't want them to get injured. So if I was going to do a 1 RM max assessment in our lab, what I would do is I would do an estimate based on a sub-maximal effort. All right, so that's how I would do a 1 RM max assessment for you guys. And we'll do that a little bit later on, give you guys the opportunity to do that at your gym. All right, so muscle endurance is something that we work on during the season. Now, muscle endurance is the ability to do something that is sub-max effort. So this is a sub-maximal effort, which means that you're not lifting as much as you can. And when I say sub-max, I also refer to, say, for instance, your heart rate. So a maximal effort would be where your heart rate goes to your heart rate, your maximal heart rate. So your heart rate max, HR max, is usually determined using an equation. Does anybody know what that equation is? Maximum heart rate equation. Anybody come to the mic?
Is it your 220 minus your age?
Exactly right. 220 minus your age. Now, there's a couple of other equations that we could use that might be more or less accurate, but 220 minus your age. So I'm 44. 220 minus 44 is 176, I believe. So if I'm doing exercise and my heart rate gets to about 176 beats per minute, then I'm at my maximum heart rate. A sub-max exercise is an exercise designed not to get your heart rate to 176. Now, if I'm doing a sub-max effort and my heart rate gets to 176, something's going wrong. I should stop. Also, the term sub-maximum could refer to the fact that if my 1 RM max for bench press, if my 1 RM max is equal to, say, for instance, 200 pounds, and I'm lifting less weight than that, then that would also be an indicator of maximum effort versus not maximum effort. So your maximum effort could be uh, determined by heart rate, or it could be determined by the intensity of the exercise that you are performing. But endurance is the capacity to perform a sub-max effort for a long period of time. So if somebody is doing push-ups, or if I do a sit-up test, or if I do even dips, right? This is repeated muscle contractions. So if I do a push-up test or a sit-up test in a lab, that is not a test of muscular strength, nor is it a test of power, an assessment of muscular power. All right. Push-ups, pull-ups, dips, leg raises, all of that stuff, even something like squats, bicep curls. If you're doing more than one of them and you're doing repeated muscular contractions, really you're working on endurance. And I would say that if you're trying, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, if you're doing strength and power, you want to work between 2 to 6 reps per set. And if you're working on hypertrophy, which is muscle building, then you want to work between 7 to 10 reps. And I'll show you this later. And if you're doing muscular endurance, you want to be doing like 15 plus reps per set. Now, if you do 2 to 6 reps, like you're lifting enough weight so that I can only do 2 to 6 reps, that weight is pretty high. If the weight is pretty high, then the stress on your muscles is pretty high, and the micro damage to your muscles is going to be pretty high. Therefore, the endocrine response, your testosterone and your growth hormone response to those bouts of exercise and that micro damage is going to be high. All right. And because of that, your muscle is going to grow. But if I'm doing things like push ups or dips, and I'm doing 20, 25, 30 dips, that intensity is not high enough to cause that micro damage to occur. So the testosterone, estrogen, and growth hormone aren't going to be released in order to fix those muscles. So you're not going to get appreciable hypertrophy or muscle growth. What you're going to have is a change in metabolic and cardiovascular function. Number of mitochondria grow. The size of the mitochondria grow. The ATPase and the enzymes that make it so that you can break down ATP start to become higher concentration, or your cardiovascular functioning improves, your blood vesicles and your capillary concentration becomes higher. So your gains in muscular endurance are going to be because your muscles are growing and getting stronger, but mostly because you have metabolic and cardiovascular improvements. So in gymnastics, usually we're doing things like, I don't know, 3 sets of 10 handstand push-ups. We're doing dips. We're doing press handstands. We're doing push-ups, sit-ups. We're doing all sorts of different repetitive muscle contractions. And we're never lifting the maximum amount that we can. So I would argue in gymnastics, we're probably using more of a combination of muscular strength and muscular power but rather muscular power actually and muscular endurance in gymnastics. So I have a situation here where I have different types of athletes, and one athlete is able to lift 100 kilograms. All right. Another athlete is also able to lift 200 kilograms. And then a third athlete is able to lift 200 kilograms. But that athlete A is able to lift 100 kilograms, able to lift it 6 meters, or 0.6 meters rather, in 0.5 seconds. All right, that individual is lifting 100 kilograms and meters per second, which is a velocity. So 100 multiplied by 0.6 divided by 0.5, 1,177 joules of, or watts of work, joules per second, or watts of work. So this individual here is not lifting as much weight as athlete B is, but they're lifting that weight over the same distance, 0.6 meters, 0.6 meters, but they're lifting 100 kilograms in 0.5 seconds, whereas athlete B is lifting 200 kilograms, twice as much strength, but they're lifting that 200 kilograms over the course of 2 seconds. And because of that, athlete A is pumping out more power in terms of watts of power than athlete B. So athlete A is more powerful than athlete B. And athlete C, who's lifting 200 kilograms, they're lifting that 200 kilograms half as fast as athlete A. So although they're lifting 2 times the amount, they're lifting it with half the speed, and therefore athlete A is just as powerful as athlete C, even though athlete A is lifting less. So it could be the case that my athletes, my younger athletes, an athlete who only weighs 50 pounds might be less strong than my older athletes, but because that athlete is able to move quickly, that younger athlete who's not as strong could be just as powerful as an older athlete. Right? Or what is the power of somebody distributing a hit in hockey with half the speed at which somebody else is distributing that check? It's going to be twice the power. So you can manipulate speed in your training to improve power. And I think that you can improve speed day to day faster than you can improve your ability to lift and the forces that your muscles are producing. Okay? The individual here, muscular endurance, 10 repetitions with 75 kilograms, 10 repetitions with 150 kilograms, or 5 repetitions with 150 kilograms, probably this individual here is going to have the highest amount of muscular endurance. All right. Next slide. Now, we said earlier that this power word implies a rate or something is happening over a time period. Aerobic power is the ability for your body to use aerobic energy. And remember, aerobic energy is dependent upon oxygen. So it's your ability to metabolize or to break down sugars and fats and amino acids for fuel so that you can have ATP. And some people are going to be able to break down those fuels at a faster rate than others. Therefore, they have a higher aerobic power. Your maximum aerobic power is the most amount of aerobic energy that you can get with respect to the speed at which you can process that metabolic those metabolic resources. One of the limitations to maximum aerobic power or aerobic power in the first place is enzymes, oxygen, water, and a lot of those are going to be distributed through the cardiovascular system. So a primary limitation, or one of the things that reduces aerobic power, is, as this term implies, the inability to get oxygen through the system because of vascular issues or heart issues or also lung issues. Aerobic power can be tested in the lab. There's a number of different field tests that we can utilize, but we're not going to be measuring aerobic power in our labs. What we will be doing is an assessment of VO2 max, the amount of oxygen that you can breathe in at any particular time. And that's going to be an indicator of our cardiovascular fitness. And if I have strong cardiovascular system or high cardiovascular fitness, which is the primary limitation of aerobic power, I would say that using the Queen's College Step Test as an estimate of VO2 max is an indirect measurement of aerobic power. And I'll show you how to use the Queen's College Step Test to estimate VO2 max. Anaerobic power is the rate at which energy can be created using oxygen-free mechanisms. So this would be your phosphagen system, your phosphocreatine system. The speed at which your body can break down ATP, but then also recycle ATP. And that's a rate. It takes time for this to happen. And as the word power implies, it's the speed at which the energy can be released by breaking down ATP in the absence of oxygen. All right, so it's pretty much talking about also your fast glycolysis system. The way that you can do that is through a Wingate test. A Wingate test is a 30-second all-out effort. And then at the end, they take your VO2 max, or they take your heart rate as an estimate of VO2 max. Now, one of the benefits of, or one of the, just clear this. One interesting thing is VO2 max is correlated with heart rate, and it's linearly correlated with heart rate. So as VO2 max, or the need for oxygen, goes up, the increase in heart rate accompanies it in a linear relationship. So if you want to get an assessment of VO2 max, a lot of times you can measure heart rate instead of VO2. So that at the end of the Bruce treadmill protocol, or the end of the Queen's College Step Test, or the end of a 1.5-mile walk test, or the end of this Wingate anaerobic test, instead of having to directly capture oxygen, what you're going to do is use your heart rate response to these particular exercise assessments. And the heart rate response can be either graphed or can represent the VO2 response. So oftentimes heart rate is going to be the dependent variable in each of these particular assessments. We don't do the Wingate anaerobic test in our lab, but we do the VO2 max test. So, any questions so far? Okay, but not all athletes are the same. Some people are taller and shorter. Some people have higher percentage of type 1 to type 2 muscle fiber types. Genetics is different. Some people's metabolism is higher or lower. Some people have higher fat-free mass. Some people's heart works better. Some people's hormones or response to hormones or your sensitivity to particular hormones is different. So the way that we're going to train those people are going to be different as well. It could also be the case that some individuals do different sports. And if that's the case, their level of muscle strength, power, endurance, those are all going to be different as well. So when you're doing some of this cardiovascular fitness training or strength training, there are going to be some individuals that respond very well, and there's going to be other people that respond very low. There's another reason why this equation here, this energy in and this energy out equation, in versus out, is not necessarily something that we're going to be able to put all of our, eggs in the basket regarding. Because if we're going to put together our strength management business and we're going to base it all on this energy in and energy out thing, first of all, like we talked about before, it's really difficult to measure energy in as it is to measure energy out. But people are different. So if I said absolute amount of energy in versus the absolute amount of energy out and compared one person versus the next, it's going to be inconclusive in a sense because some people respond to insulin differently. Some people have different economical advantages to allow them to get to a weight facility or a workout world or something like that. So there are so many variables, whoopsies, in regards to training that we can't assume that all athletes are going to respond the same. And because of that, we cannot have a general workout plan for everyone, even though I kind of do have something like that for my athletes. We're going to have to treat all athletes as individuals and work on their strength, endurance, and power gains, somewhat differentiated. There's also the principle of specificity, which implies if I want an individual to get strong at a particular movement, then what I should do is replicate that movement as close to possible as I can. So if I want an individual to get better at doing like jumping from the ground onto a big box, they're going to start here and they're going to jump and do your, say, for instance, I don't know, jump, what is it? Vertical jump. Well, I want them to practice going from here to here. So if they practice standing on the block and jumping down, all right, it wouldn't be specific to jumping onto the block. So if I want my athletes to get better at landing, jumping off of the rings, jumping off of the high bar, if I want my athletes to get better at doing sprint training, or if I want my athletes to get stronger at dribbling or rowing, then I have to replicate the movements that they're going to be doing in that activity. So if I want my athlete to get better at landing, it doesn't make any sense to have them work jumping up to the block. I have to get them to work their eccentric quad ability, the ability for their quadriceps to elongate as they produce a force, as opposed to their hamstrings and glutes concentrically contracting to generate power to get up to the box. So the training that you're doing should be relatively close to the activity that you're trying to participate in order to get the highest training adaptations. The principle of reversibility implies that if I don't continue doing the exercise that I'm doing, the gains that I get from doing the strength will eventually be eliminated. All right, so training is going to improve strength, endurance, and power, but detraining or having your leg in a cast for 3 weeks because of injury is going to result in reversed gains, loss in strength, power, muscle size. It's going to result in atrophy and reduction in strength and power. Again, these are all just terms and terminology that you'll be using as you're working with your clients, or Tatiana, when you go to grad school and you're working with your athletes. These are all terms that you'll come up to. If you want your body to get stronger, you're going to have to overload. That doesn't mean overwork or overreach. Actually, overreach is an important term too. You're going to have to work harder than you normally work. All right, because what happens is if your muscles are working at the normal level, that normal level of intensity is not going to be enough to break down the Z discs of those sarcomeres in your muscle fibers. And if the Z discs aren't broken down, then there's not going to be any need for your endocrine system to send testosterone and growth hormone to those muscle fibers in order to create protein synthesis. So in order for these gains to be made, the body almost needs to think that it's going to get broken or break down. You need to load, or you need to work beyond your normal levels, because if it's normal levels, then your body can already handle those normal levels. So the hormone response is not going to be there. So in order for your heart to get stronger, your cardiovascular system to get stronger, your muscles to get stronger, your flexibility, your aerobic power or anaerobic power to improve, you need to work those systems beyond what they're normally capable of doing. So there needs to be progress, right? You need to increase strength, repetitions, in order to increase your hypertrophy or muscle strength and power gains. Now, that's not necessarily the case all the time. For instance, as an individual wants to get stronger, if they're doing 3 sets of 10 repetitions and they're doing dips and they want to get stronger, well, if 3 sets of 10 is easy for them, I don't want them to do 3 sets of 15 and then 3 sets of 20 and then 3 sets of 25. All right, because it's starting to get higher and higher reps. And this is going to start to be working muscle endurance. So instead of increasing the number of repetitions in that case, what I would want to do is, if my athlete is trying to get bigger muscles and they can already do 3 sets of 10, what I would do is increase the force, increase the weight, so that they can only do 3 sets of 7. And then eventually they'll keep working on 3 sets of 7. That'll get easy for them. They'll be able to do 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 9. And then I increase the weight again so that they can only do 3 sets of 7. So rather than increasing repetitions, I want to increase resistance. So when you're increasing the intensity of the training, there's a couple of different ways that you could increase strength, increase power, or manipulate these resistance and repetitions to accomplish the goals that you're trying to accomplish in terms of your specific training goals for that season. Variation is you also want to make sure that you're giving various opportunities for your athlete to improve the strength of one particular body part. So you want to vary the number of activities. So if I'm working on my subscap strength, I could do farmer carries. I could do waiter carries. I could do so I could do farmer carries. I could do subscap strength. I could do rows. All right. I could do TRX stuff. I could do drills with a ball against the wall. If I'm trying to improve subscap strength, I could vary the number or the types of exercises that I'm giving my athletes to make sure that they don't get stale, to make sure that their muscles have various opportunities and exercises to be able to increase strength. All right. But I could also not only vary the exercises, but vary what I'm doing throughout the course of the season. So I don't want to do the same thing day after day after day after day. Although with my young athletes who are like 7, 8, 11 years old, I do the same thing every day because if I don't do the same thing every day, psychologically, they can't prepare for workout and they can't help me. So I do actually a good amount of consistency in my workout, but I'll show you how I actually show you in the next couple of slides my periodization chart. Okay, where there's a system to it. We've been talking about systems. Here's another system where I put a system together. I put a system that increases the intensity, the volume, and the mode of my exercises. And what happens is the ability for strength, power, and muscle growth emerges. The way that I do that is I break up my year into periods. A macro is a lot, and a meso is medium, and micro is small. So there are macro cycles of that year. And you can even have a couple of years can be a macro cycle. So the Olympics is every 4 years. And a lot of times people train in gymnastics for the Olympic Games. They have a macro, they have a big plan that lasts for 4 years. And then every 4 years, they reevaluate their goals and what they're doing. Within this macro cycle, within this big cycle of training, there are mesocycles, which are smaller blocks of training. So for an individual training to do the Olympics, they could have a 1 year mesocycle. And then within that year, they have even bigger breakdowns. And I'll show you what I mean by all of that stuff. So you want to vary your workout plan, not only from workout to workout, or from exercise to exercise, or from push to pull, or from legs to arms, or from back to core. You also want to vary your workout plan throughout the course of the year because there are certain training goals that you want to establish, and you really only want to work on one training goal per season. My resistance training program includes hypertrophy training, strength training, and power training. They should vary between concentric and eccentric muscle contractions. Concentric muscle contractions are going against gravity and generating power. Eccentric muscle contractions are absorbing gravity, and isometric contractions are typically so that you can stabilize a joint. We need to work on all of these things. We'll also need to consider exercise order. and rest, because rest is important. And I'll show you a couple of different graphs that you can use to figure out how much rest and all sorts of stuff. So, all right, so let's take a look at this. All right. Now, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, all right, these are the guidelines in order to work strength, hypertrophy, muscle power, and muscular endurance. At a novice training level, somebody who's doing strength development should work at about 60 to 70% of their one repetition max. So let's say my one repetition max on bench pressing is 100 pounds. If I want to get stronger, I have to work between 60 and 70 pounds. I should do 1 to 3 sets. I should do 8 to 12 reps. And I should do slow to moderate velocity of movement. And I should do that 2 to 3 times per week. But notice a novice individual here is going to be doing strength training 2 to 3 days per week. And an individual who's advanced can do strength training 4 to 6 days per week. Muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth. All right, you're going to be working at a little bit of a higher 1 RM max, whereas 60 to 70%, now I'm 70 to 85% for a novice. But for the advanced individual, again, they're at 80 to 100% of their 1 RM max, sorry, up to 100% of their 1 RM max. So let me take all of this information here and show you how I apply it to my gymnastics program. All right. So I have a couple of different seasons. I have my off season, my preseason, my in season, and then I have a post season. And right now we're in the beginning of March. So we're in March 5th right now. March 5th, March 3rd, this week right here. So right now we're in the 3rd week of muscle endurance. Our championships for gymnastics are this week in May. It's like the 2nd week in May. So when they get back from their national championships, I want 1, 2, 3, and 4 weeks of rest. 4 weeks of active rest. I want them to come into the gym. I don't want them to hit the springboard. I don't want them to run. I don't want any impact on their ankles, their wrists, on their back. I want them to use the pit. I want them to use trampoline. I want them to do foam rolling. I want to do shaping strength. All right. But this is the post season. Pretty much, if I could get them not to even come into the gym, I would be okay with that. But parents pay for stuff, so they can't do that. But I would want 4 weeks of just mental rest and active rest. So this right here is a microcycle. Actually, you could even call it a mesocycle. It's like a medium cycle. And within this, I have, within this week alone, all right, this week here, I break this down even further throughout that week. So that would actually be a microcycle. Here's a macrocycle would be, you could think of a macrocycle as this whole year-long plan is a macrocycle. Then this right here is a mesocycle. Hypertrophy, you'll see each week, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So each of these colors is a 6-week mesocycle. This is a 12-week time block. That's also a mesocycle. It takes 12 weeks to work on strength and power. Why do I have 12 weeks? Well, first of all, 12 weeks or 3-week time blocks or 6-week time blocks breaks up into the year easily. But also it takes at least 10 weeks to notice changes in hypertrophy. After the first couple of weeks, you're going to improve your ability to do strength and conditioning, but that's not because your muscles are getting bigger. It's because your technique gets better, your brain sends signals better to your muscles. But then after like week 5, week 6, Your brain's sending great signals to your muscles. Your technique is better, but you're still increasing the weight. So at some point, the body has to start building muscle. That takes about 8 to 10 weeks. So if I have a 7-week mesocycle of hypertrophy, my athletes aren't going to put any weight on. They're not going to do anything. This is 12 weeks long, and you're only supposed to put on a pound a week. So in this 12 weeks, I want my athletes, my 15-year-old athletes, to put on a pound of like 6 to 10 pounds. 6 pounds in that 12 weeks, a half a pound a week. Now, if they don't have enough calories, then they're not going to be able to do that. But let's assume they're getting 4,000 calories. All right, for 12 weeks, we're going to work on hypertrophy. How do we work on hypertrophy? Well, it's based on these ACSM guidelines that I showed you right here. Muscle hypertrophy. All right, they want to work between 70 to 85% of their 1 RM max. If you notice, everything is 3 sets, 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 1 to 3 sets. So I say 3 sets of everything. And now we got to deal with the reps. 3 sets, 10 exercises. That's what you should do. Now this one's 8 to 12 reps, 6 to 12 reps, 1 to 12 reps, 8 to 12. How do we figure out the number of reps that we want them to do? Well, that's what this down here says. All right. I want them to be working at 65 to 80% of their 1 RM max for those 12 weeks. So what I could do is I could measure their 1 RM max, and then I could make percentages based off all of that, and then give each athlete a particular amount I want them to lift. But I found that was difficult. So what I do is I base it on the number of reps. In order to get your muscles bigger, you need to do between 8 to 12 reps. Or for an advanced athlete, 1 to 12 reps. So what I do is I base it on my reps. So in the beginning of the summer, I want my athlete 4 days per week on week 1 to do 10 different exercises, and I want them to lift enough weight so that they can only do between 7 and 12 reps. If they're doing it so that they can do 13, 14, 15, 20 different reps, it's just not enough weight. It's not enough weight to cause the breakdown of their muscle, the micro damage. So you're not going to get testosterone release. And because of that, you're not going to get hyper growth of the muscle. So they do between 7 and 12. If they can do 13, 14, 15, 16 of that particular exercise, add weight until they can only do 7. And you'll notice it says 7 to 12, 7 to 12 the whole time. So they're going to do these 10 different exercises, and they do them over and over and over. Maybe I even have it on my computer. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. Let me get my phone. Give me 1 second. It's 9:05. Got about another half an hour, and then we'll keep going. I'm just going to text myself something so I can open it up and show you. Give me 1 second. All right, so they're going to do 10 different exercises. It's actually way more than 10 different exercises. When it gets to my computer, I'll show you what I do. But if they can do more than 12, then they increase the weight until they can only do 7 again. And then they keep lifting that weight until they can do more than 12. And when they can do more than 12, they increase the weight, then do the exercise, increase the weight, do the exercise. So I find it easier when I'm working with a lot of people to work with the reps than it is to work with the percentages of the weight, because then I have to have a different percentage and different weight for everybody. And it just starts to get a little bit cumbersome. So at the end of those 12 weeks of working hypertrophy, then I want to work strength and power. And within this 6-week mesocycle, you can see here I have a 2-week microcycle of strength and then power and then strength and then power. So I make the muscle bigger. Then I use whatever muscle I have to increase strength and power. Then you'll notice at the end of the preseason, we're starting to get in season. I don't want their muscles to be beat up. So I switch to muscle maintenance. I just want them to maintain the muscle gains and the strength and power that they got for these 24 weeks right here. But then that means that as they go into the season, the strength and power that they got, that's what they're going to have. That's enough. And we're not going to be working on strength and power as the season goes on. How do I work strength and power? Well, you'll notice over here, they're still in the gym 4, 5, 6 days per week. So I do 4 days per week, all of this. And now they're going to be working at 85 to 80% of their 1RM max. So you'll notice if we're working strength here, now it says 5 to 6 reps, whereas before it was 7 to 12. So if they can lift something 9, 10 times, it's not enough to make them stronger. So do strength for 2 weeks, and then they do power training, and you'll notice that's 3 to 5. So they go even a little bit more intensity, or you notice that this one here for strength has 5 reps in it, and power also has 5 reps here. So you can keep the reps the same. It's just for the power training, I'm telling them to do pull-ups as quick as you can. Do dips as quick as you can. Incorporate some type of speed training within what you're doing, and that's how I manipulate the strength versus power. So let me show you real quick the extent to which we do this. It's a rainy day. All right, so this is, for instance, this is my hypertrophy phase, right? It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. This is my hypertrophy phase 2. Hypertrophy phase 1. So this is week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, this is, one second, let me go like this. Let me go like this. This is this first 6 weeks right here. The first 6 weeks of hypertrophy in this periodization chart are listed right here. So week 1 starts here. They're going to do 3 sets of 15 RDLs. Then they're going to do 3 sets of 15 goblet squats, body weight jumps, and squat to stand with reach 3 times around. Then they're going to do 3 sets of 7 lateral step-ups, lateral step-down, and lateral sliders. Then they're going to do jam ball slams, front raises, and plank up and downs, 3 sets of 20 on, 20 off. That's Monday. Then on Tuesday, they're going to start with 30 seconds on and 30 seconds off of burpees, and they're going to go around 3 times. They're going to do 40 seconds on and 20 seconds rest of floor press, TRX, and they go all the way around, and then they go 3 times around. So this one here is based on the 3 exercise sequences and 3 of them, but I'm varying the workout plan. Here they do burpees, and then they do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, finish those exercises, and then go around and do those again. Right, there's equal, this is Monday is all leg day. So you see squat, jumps, squat, lateral steps, step downs, and lateral sliders. And this is day 3. This is going to be Thursday. So squats, lunge jumps, steps. So these are leg days. These are arm days. Right, so that's hypertrophy phase weeks 1 to 6. And then weeks 7 to 12 are completely different exercises. And then the strength and power phase is, again, completely different exercises. And then, so this is how I kind of organize all my strength and conditioning in regards to my off-season, preseason goals. Right? I have to vary what I'm doing throughout the season because my goals are different. I only want to be working one goal per season. So in the off season, I want to work on muscle building, but I don't want to work on muscle building while I'm working on strength and power. I'm going to build the muscles, and this costs calories. This costs energy here, right? Their muscles are going to be sore. They're going to be tired. So I'm working on hypertrophy during the off season. And then during preseason, I'm going to start to use the muscle that I developed to get stronger and more powerful. And then as I get into in season, you'll see here, now I'm switching from plyometrics, skill productions, basics, skill sequences to routines, judging routines. And now as we get through your in season and halfway through your maintenance, halfway through the season, it's all just routines and more sport specific activities right here. All right, so this is according to all of this American College of Sports Medicine. These are charts and graphs that you'll get if you take your certified strength and conditioning specialist license and you're studying American College of Sports Medicine lifting and exercise guides. So these are all charts. The next couple of pages are all charts that I took right from the book, and I'll just show you these until 9:30, and then we'll get to our IRAT, GRAT. But what the American College of Sports Medicine suggests is if you're trying to work on muscle building, getting your muscles bigger, you should work between 6 to 12 reps. If you're able to do 13, 14, 15, 16, if I can do 3 sets of 12 dips and I want my muscles to get bigger, my coach should not say, okay, well, if you can do 3 sets of 12, why don't you up that and do 3 sets of 17? Because 17 is not enough intensity to break down the muscles. What's going to happen is you're going to be working on muscle endurance there. So these American College of Sports Medicine guidelines are exactly why I made my number of reps down here 7 to 12, 3 to 5, 5 to 6, 8 to 10. It's all because of research. Then at the end of my hypertrophy phase, at the end of this particular sequence of working out right here, these 12 weeks right here, all of my athletes will put on 6 to 10 pounds. And then their parents will look at me and they'll be like, wow, isn't that surprising? And I say, no, it's not, because what we're doing is we're following the research. And the research says that at least 85% of the time, if it's going to be published, it works. So I work here in terms of my reps, and I manipulate these here instead of my percentages of my 1 hour max, and that helps me a lot. So the next graph shows that if your training goal is strength, what you should be doing is you should be working greater than 85% of your calculated or your estimated 1 hour max for that particular exercise. But that means that you need to know what your 1 hour max is for squats, bench press, floor press, all of it. For me, I just need to know what these repetition goals are. The goals to get strength are less than 6 reps. Right, so that's where those guidelines in my hypertrophy section come from, 6 to 12. All right, now if your training goal is, now you see this says 2 to 6 sets, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, 3 to 6, and all of them include the number 3. So because of that, I just do 3 sets of 10 exercises, 3 sets of 10. Right? And within those sets, I want them to do a particular number of reps. If they can do more than those reps, I increase the weight so that they can only do reps. So really the only thing that I manipulate is the exercise that we're doing, whether or not it's farmer carries or RDLs or TRX rows, but everything is usually 10 exercises, 3 sets, and I manipulate the reps. And now working with young kids, that makes it much easier to do, because I don't have to focus on too many variables. Now, rest is also really important. If you're trying to do strength training, you want to do your set and you want to rest 2 to 5 minutes. Why? Well, usually strength training is going to burn ATP, and it needs to be about 5 to 7 minutes for that ATP recycling to occur so that you can have enough strength for the next bout. All right, so rest periods are very important. If I don't have enough ATP recycled and I'm doing strength, then what's going to happen is I'm going to start to use sugars for fuel, and it's not going to be the correct sugar to use if I'm trying to become stronger or more powerful. So same thing, rest period for strength and power, 2 to 5 minutes. And then if you're trying to do hypertrophy training, you want a little bit less rest. So usually what I do is I use one of these things. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of this, but it's called a Tabata. I'm sure you guys have seen it before. If you look at the screen, you'll see kind of what the Tabata is. It's like this. One second. One second. Let me just. Bummer. One second. I don't know if you can see that. Hold on. Let me get rid of my virtual background. Stop share. And we'll only go for a couple more minutes. We'll go for 12 minutes. So I use one of these things here. Whoops, use a phone. And then I just have a Tabata. Right? I try not to tell my kids what to do ever. I try to give them the plan, and then we work on the plan together. So I don't tell them you should be working out now. You should not be working out now. My phone does all of that stuff. I use my phone. I share the plan with all the kids. I work with them, and I don't tell them what to do. So the phone tells them how long they should be working for. The phone tells them whether or not they can go to the bathroom. Is it green? Well, then you can't go to the bathroom. But if it's red,
stopping session,
then you can go to the bathroom. So I try to take a lot of my instruction and I try to distribute in many different ways. So I'm not telling the athletes what to do all the time. All right, so let's just go back to this here. So rest is important. And these are the ACSM guidelines in terms of rest for each one of these training goals. All right, and it tells you what energy system you're using. So if your bout of exercise is very intense and it lasts from 0 to 6 seconds, you're working your phosphagen system. So right here, I think this is about how long a shift in hockey lasts, 2 to 3 minutes. And I don't think that necessarily Drew is going 100% effort that whole 2 to 3 minutes. So he's doing a moderate effort. He's working 2 to 3 minutes at a time. So I want him to be working predominantly as fast glycolysis, the ability to break down sugars without oxygen. All right, using the lactic, breaking down to lactic acid, buffering all of that lactic acid in his body. So if I was going to suggest anything at all to Drew in terms of a workout supplement, what I would suggest is maybe some sodium bicarbonate, because it's the sodium bicarbonate that neutralizes the increased acidic nature of his blood. So it would help get rid of all of that muscle soreness associated with the high acidity in his blood. Drew, do they tell you to take any bicarbonate or anything like that?
I've never taken anything like that before, no.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part with my athletes, I never suggest anything in terms of supplements, but I mean, depending upon the intensity and the duration of the activity, you also want to make sure that you're working this particular system. So if you're doing 0 to 6 seconds of activity and you're training your oxidative system, your energy, the way that your body is getting energy just is not the correct way. You would want to work your phosphagen system. So an individual who's working for 0 to 30 seconds, I might even suggest have some creatine monohydrate. All right. For an individual who's working at greater than 3 minutes, I would want to make sure that they're taking in a good amount of sugars, long lasting sugars. So this will give you an understanding of which energy systems to train. Not only do you want to train your muscles or your brain or your flexibility, but you want to hydrate, you want to rest, and you want to work your body's ability to get energy effectively. So you want to keep working that too. So if you're doing exercise that lasts for about 5 to 10 seconds, and you're doing about 90% of your power, then you're using your phosphagen system, and this is the work to rest ratio. So I think that Drew is a little bit like this. So 30 to 75% of maximum power probably is what a hockey shift is. Sometimes you're skating all out, but sometimes you're just gliding down the ice, waiting for the puck to come to you or whatever. You're using your fast glycolysis and oxidative system. Your exercise time is about 1 to 3 minutes, 2.5 minute shift, and you want to rest for 3 to 4 times that amount. So if your shift is 2 minutes, the amount of rest should be about 6 minutes. So he's got a 2 minute on and 6 minute off. And that's why they have 3 to 4 lines in hockey, so that you have the appropriate rest in between your bouts of activity, right? That's where all of this is coming from. And then this is some hints in terms of increasing testosterone. Sometimes, especially with older athletes, it's difficult to keep testosterone levels higher. And sometimes with steroids and stuff, people want to artificially increase the concentration of testosterone. If you want to do that, rather than taking testosterone replacement therapy, what you want to do is work on your large muscle groups. So deadlifting, power clean, squats. You want to make sure that you're lifting between 85 to 95% of your 1 RM max. You want to do high volume of exercise, short rest intervals, and really push your body. And a lot of these changes in the concentration of testosterone aren't going to be changing very, very quickly. You need to pretty much be involved in resistance training for a good period of time to see natural increases in testosterone. All right, so let's see what else we got here. And then there's different, within this periodization chart and all of these resistance exercises that you could be doing, there's different types of exercise. There's free weights, there's machines, there's ellipticals, there's all sorts of different training modes that you could get into. But I think that I probably want to move on to our, oh, we got a couple minutes left. So let's see what we got here. And then you just want to make sure that you're picking the correct type of exercise, right? Core exercise, sport specific training, um, uh, free weights, or using a weight machine or ellipticals, right? You got to make sure that you're choosing an exercise mode that people want to do. Well, we already talked a lot about this stuff. We want to pick an exercise that's specific to what you're working on. We want to pick an exercise that people have access to. We want to pick exercises that are sport specific. We want to pick exercises that get your heart rate to a particular value, so that you're working between either your target training mode for your heart rate and cardiovascular system, or that you're working within a particular intensity so that you can work on hypertrophy or strength and power gains. You want to make sure that if you're a swimmer, that you're working in a pool if you can, in terms of there are differences in heart rate and cardiovascular functioning in and out of a pool. So if you're a swimmer, you want to make sure that you're training in the pool. All right. If you're world class, you want to increase your number of workouts per week. So there are a number of different variables and different training methods that are mentioned within the chapter. I think the goal is to make sure that you're picking activities for your athletes and clients that are fun, that they're going to want to do, that are have a good variety, that don't increase repetitive forces on muscles past the point that they can't stay healthy. You want to keep your muscles in their elastic region in terms of their stress strain curves. And then you can also do things like circuit training, cross training, and all sorts of different modes in terms of running, fartlek training, high intensity interval training, jogging, doing cross training between exercises. All right. And then use other things like a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to join Workout World with her. And I said, no, I'd rather just run outside or do activity in my apartment instead of a big conglomerate like that. So there are many opportunities for you to vary your exercises, your intensity, and depending upon the season at which you're working on, you might want to come up with your own periodization chart for your athletes or for yourself, or at least use the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines to be able to put together a workout plan. All right, so that's, I think, the most important parts of this chapter. Does anybody have any questions? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to